Christianity is a mental disease. Well, extreme Christianity is a mental disorder. Or was it extreme Christianity to the point of being intolerant could be a mental disorder? Or was it that intolerance itself was a mental disorder? Oh, no, I remember what it was. There were 3 people who proposed the idea that extreme intolerance could be a mental disorder. Yeah, that's what it was. I wonder why I thought it was a personal attack. I guess it was because I was listening to Todd Friel of Wretched. Let's hear what he has to say on this.
I think we need to remind our empirical friends, our secular humanist friends, that science has some criteria. I cannot call myself a scientist without doing some actual science. What is science? I can observe it. I can test it. It's repeatable. It's verifiable.
Okay, sure. Fair enough. What's the issue?
Ask yourself the question, does psychiatry qualify for that?
Yes. Well, it kind of gets confusing because the line between a psychiatrist and a clinical psychologist kind of blurs a little bit. But, yeah, it does.
Answer, no, can't, because there are no tests for issues that the DSM-5 continues to tell us are mental disorders.
Well, the DSM is based on genuine research in the field. Maybe we don't discover mental illnesses by tests, but that's simply not how it works. I mean, a mental illness, I meant to say personality disorder, isn't a terribly strictly defined thing. It's simply a way of thinking, feeling, and behaving that deviates from the expectations of the culture, causes distress or problems functioning, and lasts over time, according to the DSM-5. Do we really need advanced scientific tests to see if something fits that description? I mean, we can conduct tests to find underlying causes and possible treatments, but in order to classify something as an illness, it only really needs discussion and empirical study, although, to be fair, that empirical study could very well include tests.
She writes, it suggests you and I might suffer from intolerant personality disorder. What?
She said intolerant personality disorder. Okay, when I looked up intolerant personality disorder, I found this, a 2003 article from the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry, and virtually nothing else. There was this article and hardly even a discussion about it. So, what's the article about? Well, I can summarize it with this quote. Behind racism, sexism, and homophobia, there seems to be a common core of intolerance that supports and contributes to these attitudes or mindsets in their various manifestations. The traits associated with this form of intolerance, when taken as a whole, seem to be descriptive of a personality disorder. And I think that they make an interesting case. But what does an intolerant person think about it?
If you do things that make people feel bad, you have intolerant personality disorder.
A quote from the article. It is not our intent to medicalize intolerance or to contribute to a disease model of mental health intervention. On the contrary, we believe it necessary to name extreme intolerance as a psychopathology to open up a dialogue with our mental health community colleagues so that intolerance can be documented and researched with the goal of developing treatment approaches that may ultimately be a part of the solution to profound social injustice concerns. It's not just that you're making people feel bad, but instead they're saying that social learning, as well as a lack of empathy, can lead people to be intolerant enough to harm people by denying them their rights and freedoms, thereby affecting their quality of life, because of their beliefs, background, what have you.
Christians, you and I are the people that make people feel bad. We make people feel bad. Why? Because Jesus is a stumbling block. People don't like hearing, no, you can't earn your way to heaven. You're condemned. God has you in his scope, and you're going down. And your only hope of rescue is Jesus Christ. Escape the wrath that is to come. Believe in him and him only. Consider not just Jesus a stumbling block. What about moral issues? What about marriage issues? What about taking care of children issues? What about role issues? Speak up. You've got a personality disorder. It's IPD, intolerant personality disorder.
Well, yeah, I think there's a case to be made when you're denying people their rights and freedoms based on their beliefs, backgrounds, practices, what have you. Harming people with little empathy seems psychopathic. Now, perhaps I should say that not every Christian is like that, but this true Christian camp seems to be.
This is disturbing. I would like to read some of this to you so that you can see what they're trying to do, understand what they're trying to do, because likely if this gathers any sort of steam, it could ultimately roll us over. It starts typically in academia. That's what this is.
Well, considering that this article came out 15 years ago and has seldom been discussed since, I don't think this is going to gain much momentum. Bigots rejoice.
This particular presentation, prepared by 3 PhDs from Johns Hopkins University.
Yeah, I got the right article.
You're going to hear category confusion. You're going to hear a relabeling of things from sin to disease. This is the whole, everything is a disease. Everything is a disorder. Nothing is sin. Nothing is because of the fall in secular psychiatry world. It's all some sort of pathology.
Consider that the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry isn't the study of Christian mythology. If it was, mental illness would be explained by demons, and we'd have the laying on of hands, as well as thoughts and prayers, in the place of medicine. No one would actually get healed, since that doesn't work, and we'd be taken back a few millennia. I personally am glad that modern medicine is based on actual empirical evidence instead of superstitious dogma.
Their groupings are troubling. Intolerance, very poorly defined.
From the article, intolerance is generally defined as the state of being unwilling or unable to endure or accept the beliefs, perspectives, or practices of others. It also involves a lack of recognition and respect for the fundamental rights and choices of others. We suggest that such intolerance becomes psychopathological when rigid beliefs lead a person to suppress the quality of life of another person or group, causing pain and suffering through denial of liberty, equal rights, or freedom of expression. What's wrong with that?
And we need to be aware of how to deal with some of these things because they're not 100% wrong. This might come across as a little bit shocking, but in a sense, if I hold to an attitude that makes somebody feel bad, and if that is a sinful thing, well, it comes from my broken brain. Yes, they're right, but because of their category confusion, they throw in beliefs as a disorder.
Okay, so when you agree with the intolerance, it's not an issue? It's okay if it's towards the right people, right? Outcasting or denying the rights of those that Christianity dictates is perfectly okay. You're the problem here.
But the reality is we all have a mental illness because of the fall. The theological term is the noetic effect of the fall. Our brains don't work right. So in that sense, yes, they're right, but because of their category confusion, they throw in beliefs as a disorder. They say that it's a mental problem because you're making somebody feel bad. So that belief you're holding on to is outside of the range of norm. And what is the range of norm? If it doesn't make somebody feel bad, it's fine. If it does make somebody feel bad, it's not.
This isn't a theological issue. I don't even think it's a mental health issue. I think that it's a social issue. Of course, I don't believe Christian theology, and I'm not going to unconvince anybody of it right now, but the issue is that Christians are learning this. That's the problem. Oh, my theology says this. This is what I believe. That's the issue. You are taught intolerance and you learn it, and of course you think you learned correctly, but I mean, have a little empathy. I know that you want to feel like you're above everyone else, that you know the right way, but you're not, and you don't.
Let me read this to you. Prepare to be shocked. Racism, sexism, and homophobia do not fit into any current diagnostic category. The authors, the three aforementioned PhDs from Johns Hopkins, propose that those who engage in such behaviors display a form of psychopathology deserving of its own category. What? And this is where definitions are important.
He only read the abstract. Well, half of it so far. I mean, granted, he may not know that you can find the whole thing on ResearchGate, and maybe he doesn't have the time to read through the whole thing for 10 minutes of his podcast. But regardless, the actual text of the article gives you far more insight and actually explains everything, so it's kind of funny to see him arguing with the abstract, thinking that he's making some kind of a point.
Is racism a sin? Yes. It is an effect of the fall? Yes. Is it a disease? I wouldn't put it that way. Even though we've got diseased brains, if you will, I still would categorize it the way the Bible does, not as a mental disorder, but as a sin disorder.
It was here that I realized exactly what was going on here. This is the denial of modern medicine. And sure, psychiatry has its fair share of criticisms, but this is beyond that. This is bah humbug, what we really need is Jesus.
Because of the fall. But sexism, so roles of men and women, that's a psychopathology. And homophobia, see, here's the problem with the definition. If you're attacking somebody who's gay simply because they're gay, well, that would be called a crime. I'm not sure I would call it a sin. I guess I wouldn't even have a problem if somebody is hating by calling that a symptom of a broken brain. But to call it a pathology as if it either needs psychotherapy or it needs medication or you need to be deemed like somebody who has a social personality disorder, you perhaps need to be locked up so you can't make anybody feel bad.
The actual article explains all of that. It outlines a therapeutic approach to it, and it doesn't say that we need to medicate or lock up the intolerance. They say it's a form of psychopathology because you're harming people with a lack of empathy. Yes, your religious views are intolerant, and yes, that is what they are talking about. Your lack of empathy towards those that you try to oppress, although it's not limited to a religious reasoning. Anyway, Todd goes on to dismiss what the article, or rather the abstract, says, and continues to try to justify his intolerance, not really seeing the irony here. But that's the issue, isn't it? It's more than just a lack of empathy. It's not just social learning. It's dogma. Religious dogma is what leads too many people to suppress the rights of women and LGBT, and that's a tougher nut to crack.